Facebook didn't exist. How do we survive before we had Facebook? Crazy, right? I fasted on my own because I didn't know there were people out there that knew about this. The author of the book was dead. He died in 1932 or something, 1931. I found this book around 1990, 60 years later. We had a search engine of sorts. It was called the Yellow Pages. You familiar with the Yellow Pages? It's a big phone book, right? If you went to the fasting section, or the F section of the Yellow Pages, you know what it said under fasting? Nothing. There was nothing there. I didn't know there were people out there that were doing this. There were places I could have gone, but I didn't know that. I was on my own. So I worked my way up, and I learned the hard way. I did a lot of fasting. Now, some of you already know this, but for the last 22 and a half years, nearly 23 years now, I've run the world's largest dedicated water fasting center. Okay? And the reason why I decided to open this center, Tanglewood, was because when I realized there were places out there and I looked around at them, I didn't like what I saw. They were clinical, and they were run by people who didn't really understand health. My largest competitor in the world is a place in California called True North. The guy that owns the center has done one fast of 21 days. One. That's it. He's fasted. Since then, he's been fasting for about a week every year. He's probably 65 now, so he's probably fasted about a year of his life in little pieces. No, not quite a year, maybe 40 weeks or so. I fasted more than 3 years of my life cumulatively. I had fasted almost 36 times before I took the first client, because I thought, how could I fast other people if I don't really understand the process myself? There's nobody else supervising fasts that has that experience, as far as I know. Okay? Fasting, and again, I know this sounds crazy to some of you, but what you want to be clear about is that fasting is nature's way of allowing the organism to heal itself. So how many of you have seen a sick animal, maybe your cat or your dog or a horse or a donkey or a giraffe or a blue whale? Have you seen this happen? They get sick and they stop. Was it a blue whale? No? Animals get sick and they refuse to eat. Your cat or dog will refuse to eat. You can put the food right in front of them. They won't touch it. In fact, when you were a child and you got sick, you didn't want to eat. Your mother made you eat because she believed that's what you needed to do. But your body knew exactly what it was doing, because processing food takes more energy than anything else we do. And that's why every organism, 25 million of them, when they get sick enough, they stop eating. Because that's nature's way of allowing the organism to get out of its own way. So, hypertension. Medicine says, incurable. Type 2 diabetes, incurable. Crohn's disease, incurable. Ulcerative colitis, incurable. Many of the diseases people deal with today, there is no cure for them. So says medicine. In 22 and a half years, I fasted more than 300 hypertensive clients. 100% success, except for the one guy that I'll never forgive. Okay, he started out with blood pressure 172 over 96 or something, and finished at 126 over 75. Still above normal, but I would say pretty successful. Every other person completed their process with below normal blood pressure. Every one of them. Okay? They went from some of these people from having a 200% greater chance of heart attack or stroke than the average person their age to having 0 chance. Because if your blood pressure is 110 or below your systolic pressure, there's no chance of heart attack or stroke. It doesn't happen. If it's normal, you still have a chance. because normal ain't healthy. How many of you know that? Normal ain't healthy. What does normal mean? Normal means average. Remember, the average person's got an 80% chance of dying of cancer, heart disease, or stroke. Do you want to be normal? Hell no. You want to be a lot better than normal. Okay? You want to forget about norms. Let's talk about what's healthy, not what's normal. Normal body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. Is that healthy? Nope. It's not. Every time you eat cooked food, there's an immune response. And part of that immune response is raising your body temperature. Why? Because your white blood cells, the immune system's foot soldiers, work harder at higher temperature. So the average person's walking around with a low-grade fever all the time. Every day. How hot does it get here in the summertime? 40 degrees. Okay? 38, 40, whatever it is. I was talking to someone who's from Iatrogenic, told me it can be 50 down there. Do you think you'd be more comfortable at 37 degrees or at 35.5 degrees, 36 degrees? If your body temperature were cooler, you'd be a lot more comfortable. That's where it should be. That's what a healthy body temperature is. Okay, we can't believe what medicine tells us because medicine's numbers come from working with sick people. Doctors don't ever see healthy people. You know when the last time I had a checkup was, a regular checkup? You know? I don't know. I don't know either. I don't remember. It was more than 30 years ago. I don't go to doctors for any reason except trauma. Trauma. Accidents. I had a remodeling accident. I'm going to take questions later. I had a remodeling accident. I don't know if you can see this or not. There's 2 scars here on my wrist, either side of my watch band. Can you see them from there? Might be a little hard to see. But I had a construction accident. I was finishing up this space. There was a basement had been dug out there. Are there basements here in Israel? That's where your bomb shelters are, right? It's a little different. We don't have bomb shelters in the U.S., most people. But someone had dug out half of the basement just to create some storage space. And they'd added this concrete stairwell that went down. And one of the bedrooms in the house, it was a 2-bedroom, single-bath house. I'd put a second floor on it, so I had 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. But this bedroom, I noticed from the outside, from the stairwell, that the window had been bricked up. Inside it was this beautiful pine paneling, but I thought, you know, I'm going to turn this into a little greenhouse and put a window back in there so you can see into the greenhouse from inside the space. And I wound up tiling all the concrete and drywalling it and putting a skylight in. And I was standing on a kitchen stool. You know those kitchen stools that swivel? So I'm standing on a swivelly kitchen stool, and I've got drywall scraps and tools on the floor. So it's swivelly, and it rocks a little bit because one of the legs has something underneath it. And I'm thinking, no problem. No problem. I've been practicing yoga for years. I can stand on 1 foot all day long. Big deal, right? I've got the balance. Well, I reach out a little too far as I'm doing this plaster work, and I kick the stool down the stairs. And I go tumbling down the concrete stairs. And when I land on the basement floor, I've got a stack of this stuff called drywall corner bead. Any builders here? So where you have a corner that sticks into the room like this, the way you get this sharp corner here is there's a metal molding. It comes in 8-foot strips. I'm trying to think what that is in centimeters, but it doesn't matter. 240. Comes 240 long and maybe, 2.5 centimeters or so on either face, 90 degrees. I've got a stack of it lying on the floor with one edge standing up. It's razor-thin metal. Razor-thin metal. So I land on the basement floor. My left wrist comes down on this stack of material, bounces, and comes down again. That's why I've got 2 scars. I severed all of my flexor tendons. These are flexor tendons. These are extensor tendons that allow me to extend, flex. I've got flexor tendons. You have them too in your wrist. I severed all of them twice. There are 2 arteries that feed each hand. I severed one of the arteries in 2 places. I severed all the nerves this side of my left hand. Fortunately, my head is harder than concrete. Because I landed on the floor, hit my head, and got up and said, ow, that hurts, right? And, you know, if you've never seen an artery cut before, the blood is just pumping out. I'm sorry to make this too graphic, but I thought, okay, that's an issue. That's a problem. A Band-Aid's not going to work here, right? So I put pressure on it, went upstairs, got a kitchen towel, made myself a tourniquet to stop the blood flow to my hand, and called an ambulance and went out in the front yard and waited for them to come pick me up. And I still, to this day, I pity my poor girlfriend. At the time I was living with a woman, and I can imagine she came home. My car's in the driveway. She comes home. I'm not there. She can't find me. There's blood everywhere, right? Back then we had answering machines. Who still remembers what an answering machine is? So I had the presence of mind when I got to the hospital to call. So there was a little flashing red light. When she got home, she picked it up and I said, hey, honey, I'm at the hospital. Little accident. I'll be okay. The surgeon came in to see me. They sent a hand surgeon in because my hand was like this. I couldn't move anything. And the hand surgeon came in and was talking about the surgery. And I'd given up health insurance when I was 26 years old because I'd taken responsibility for my health. Okay? I haven't been sick a single day since I was 26 years old. I'm coming up on 59. Okay? Haven't been sick one day. Not a cold, not a flu, not a headache, nothing. My body works better today than it did when I was 18, literally. In fact, when I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, I could actually see Pikes Peak, the highest peak, right, in Colorado, from my window. And I loved to ski. We had amazing skiing there. And I would ski whenever I could. But in order to ski, I had to wear big braces on my knees with metal hinges to support my knees because I was born with a congenital knee defect. It meant that my kneecaps had too much movement, and so the cartilage underneath would get torn up. Now, I didn't know this was there until I was 18 years old, when it typically shows up between 18 and 21, right? Because by then, most people have done enough damage to start feeling like there's a problem, and that's what happened to me. I started feeling I couldn't bend my leg some days, I couldn't straighten it some days. So I had to wear these braces to ski. A few years ago, at the age of 54, 55, I've been body surfing. I was a competitive swimmer for many years, and I grew up going to the beach, the Atlantic Ocean. But by the way, you know, this happens every time. I keep forgetting. I'm thinking, Tel Aviv, I'm going to be on the ocean. And I get here, oh, it's a sea. It's like a big lake. Like there's waves today, like this big, right? I'm used to waves. So I've been body surfing since I was a little kid, 6, 7 years old. And a few years ago, I thought, it's time to learn how to surf a surfboard. I started surfing a surfboard. Same exact action as skiing, except I can do today at almost 59 what I couldn't do when I was 18. Okay? Your body can get healthier than it's ever been. It really can. Okay? So I woke up, I said to this doctor, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the surgery. Now, I was in shock. But he said, if you want to use your hand again, the surgery is going to be kind of important because nothing worked, right? Everything had been severed. He said, you need to do the surgery. And I said, I don't have insurance. I don't think I can pay for this. He said, don't worry about it. You can handle that later on. So I had surgery. I woke up the next morning. He didn't tell me this was going to happen, but I had surgical thread sewn right through the end of each of my fingers. Surgical thread just sitting there at the end of my fingers. Like, what's this about? Well, the next day he sent me to a guy for rehab. A guy named Sam, whose business was called Hand Rehab Services. That's all he did was focus on people with hand issues. That was his whole business. And what Sam did was he made a plexiglass hood that was molded to my arm. Again, my hand was in this shape. It was molded like that. There was a Velcro strap here across my palm and another one down here across my forearm. And the threads that were sticking out of my fingers were attached to rubber bands, tied to rubber bands, which were then pinned to the strap down here. And they kept my fingers like this. So that as I started to get strength and movement back over the weeks that followed, I could extend my fingers, but the rubber bands would pull them down because they didn't want to put any stress on the repairs. Remember, I'd severed each of those tendons in 2 places. He didn't want those tendons to be doing any work. That's what the surgical threads were there for. I had no movement at first. I saw Sam every day the first week. He did all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, he would massage it and put creams on it and use magnets. And there was this machine. I'd stick my hand inside this glove, inside a box, where there was hot sawdust blowing around. And I'm going, really? Like, this seems like voodoo to me. Okay, but whatever. You're the expert. Okay. Now, both the surgeon, after the surgery, and the rehab guy, Sam, said to me, Loren, they said, the surgery went well, but you did a lot of damage. You may never have full use of your hand again. You're going to be in physical therapy for at least a year. The surgeon told me that. Sam told me exactly the same thing. I saw him every day the first week and then every other day, and it started to become twice a week. And 7 weeks and 1 day after the accident happened on a Sunday I'll never forget because one of my best friends from college got married on Saturday night. The wedding was in her backyard in New Jersey. The wedding was at the church. The party, the reception, I don't even remember the wedding. The reception was in their backyard in New Jersey, overlooking the river and the Tappan Zee Bridge, which goes into New York City. If you've never seen it, it's beautiful. There's lights on it, and their backyard overlooked this. It was beautiful. The house was smaller than the stage. It was tiny. Okay, they were broke, just out of college, a few years. Not anymore. Now they're broke out of college many years, having made and lost a bunch of money. But anyway, because I'd gotten sick, I decided, before I turned 25, that I was done with alcohol and other things. I tried various other substances. Any of you try anything? Anyone try marijuana? I tried marijuana 5,000 times maybe. Just to be sure. How do you know until you really are sure, right? I gave up drugs. I gave up alcohol. And so here I'm at this party. All my college friends are getting wasted. And have you ever been around people like that when you're completely sober? It's not all that much fun, really. You're thinking, these people are idiots. Why am I hanging out with these people, right? And I thought, at around midnight, I thought, you know what? I'm going to drive home 5.5, 6 hours now at midnight so that tomorrow I can work on my house because this is like the last project. I bought this house when I was 23 or 24, thinking I'd fix it up in a couple of years. I did all the work myself. It took me a while. But I'd fix it up in a couple of years. I'd sell it, and I'd get a bigger one, a better one. The house was in downtown Bethesda, half a mile from the metro station, 13 minutes into the center of Washington, D.C., and it was a pretty nice, convenient place to live. I had like this rockin' bachelor pad, right? And so here it is, 12 years later. I'm still there. The accident happened around 7 years into this journey. But I never thought I'd be there that long. And here I'm thinking, okay, last project. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to drive home now. I'll get a few hours of sleep. So I'm standing on this swivelly rocking chair with like 3 hours of sleep, right, doing my best to maintain my balance when I had this accident. That was on Sunday. 7 weeks and 1 day later, on a Monday, I'm in Sam's office. And he does all the stuff he normally does. But now he's checking to see. Now the threads are gone from my fingers. I've got movement back. And he wants to see, how am I doing? So he tests strength and flexibility. Now remember, it was like this. I couldn't move. So he has me put my hand down on the table between us. There's a table between us. And lean over it to see how much flexion I have. And he sees this and says, let me see the other one. So I do my right hand, which hadn't been injured. And he's looking at me puzzled. I said, Sam, let me see you do it. He didn't have as much flexion in his wrists as I had in the one I had just injured 7 weeks earlier. He checks, all these other tests for strength, etc. And he's looking at his clipboard with this puzzled look on his face. And he says, I don't know how to explain this. I said, what, Sam? He said, well, I've been doing this for 27 years. I've never seen anything like this before. And I said, what? And he said, you're completely healed. You don't need to come back. He had guaranteed me it was going to be at least a year of physical therapy and I might never have full use of my hand. I had full use of my hand and full strength and flexibility returned in 7 weeks and 1 day. So he said to me, he said, I don't know how to explain this. And I said to him, I can explain this. He said, how? I said, well, from the moment of the accident, I stopped eating for a couple weeks. He said, what do you mean you stopped eating? How'd you do that? I said, Sam, fasting. What every species on the planet does. I fasted so my body could put all of its energy into healing the injury. In the last 32 years, every time I've had anything I've needed to heal, and some people might say I'm a little reckless, but I used to do a lot of rock climbing. I still ride a motorcycle. I have a quadricycle as well. You know the quadricycles, big balloon tires? They're like 4 wheels. It's like a motorcycle with 4 tires and big balloon tires. Okay, I surf. So in the last 30 years, I've broken 7 fingers, 2 of them twice, 2 toes, 2 ribs, both knees, and my right hip. Yeah. None of them have ever been set by a doctor. And so today you can actually see 3 or 4 of my fingers aren't straight anymore. They still work. And it's important to understand something. Some people think that the doctor heals your broken finger or broken whatever. No, they don't. What they do is they set it so it's straight. I didn't get that done. Mine aren't straight. But the healing is a biological process. The body always does that. My hand modeling career is over, unfortunately, before it started. But that's okay. Everything works. Okay? Fasting. Now, how many of you are familiar with Hippocrates? Hippocrates. Hippocrates in Hebrew. Okay? That he was considered the first Western doctor, right? Greek. Everyone's familiar with 2 of his quotes. Some of you don't know you're familiar with it, but you probably are. Anyone know? That's not exactly it. Anybody else? Something about food, something about medicine, something about healing, right? What he said was, now you're onto it. Let's come to the second. Let's go to the other one first, right? It's kind of interesting because his two primary quotes, the first one was co-opted by Western medicine, by allopathy. Hippocrates said, first, do no harm. First, do no harm. Okay, oops. They kind of forgot about that. Did you know? The official #1 cause of death is now cancer. It was heart disease until recently. Now it's cancer. Heart disease is #2. Cancer is on the rise. Okay, #3, leading cause of death officially. Anyone know? I don't know how to say this in Hebrew, but in English it's called Iatrogenic Disease. And what it means is mistakes of doctors and medicine. Doctors and medicine kill more people than anything besides cancer and heart disease. That's the official statistic. World Health Organization, the American Medical Association. Those are the official statistics. Unofficially, it's a little different. Because a lot of people are being killed by medicine, but it's not recognized that way. Okay? So they're labeled as dying of a stroke or dying of heart disease, when in truth it was the treatment that killed them. Many people die of chemotherapy, and yet they're called cancer deaths, not medical deaths. Okay? So, first, do no harm. The second one, the one that most of you probably know, let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food. Now, years ago, there's a very expensive healing center in Florida called Hippocrates. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I was on a lecture tour in Florida, and I had a whole room full of Hippocrates health educators in front of me that I was teaching. And I said to them, how many of you know what his next words were? No one, his next words. After, let your food be your medicine, let your medicine be your food. What did he say after that? No one knew. Nobody knew this. I'm like, really? You guys are Hippocrates health educators. You should know what Hippocrates said. Hippocrates' words were, let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food. But to feed yourself when you're already sick is to feed the disease. Okay? What was Hippocrates saying? What should you do when you're sick? Fast. Fast. Allow the body to heal itself. Okay? This is what works. This is why we see every hypertensive client healing. We've seen more than 75 people with type 2 diabetes. 100% success. If you've got type 2 diabetes, your body can heal from that. It's easy. It's easy. Okay? Almost every condition. It's amazing what we see. It's incredible what happens. So, is everyone okay? All right. I'm asking because it's been an hour and a half. I'm not quite done yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up in the next 15 or 20 minutes, if you can bear with me. And then we'll take a break. And then I'll come back and I'll answer some questions and I'll tell you some more stories. Okay? Is that fair? Everyone doing okay so far? Okay. So, it was step by step along my journey, I realized what I know today. It took me a while to figure this out. Not only does medicine not heal disease, it causes disease. Every single time you take an aspirin or any other medication to suppress a symptom, you are A, not addressing the underlying cause of the problem, and B, making your body more toxic, because these substances are all toxic, without exception. What you're doing is making yourself sicker, not less sick. You want to be clear about this, okay? So you can feel and function as well as you possibly can, amazingly well. But the key isn't medicine, and it's not alternative medicine. It's to align yourself with the laws of nature. It's to understand that health is the natural result of meeting your body's needs. You see, most people think that we have to do specific things to ensure we don't get disease. Preventative measures, that eat this food because it prevents this condition. But that thinking is based on a faulty paradigm. You know the word paradigm? Paradigma. Okay. Based on one of those, but it's a faulty one. And that paradigma says that disease is inevitable. People say to me all the time, you're still going to get cancer or heart disease, everyone does. No, not at all. Cancer and heart disease are caused by the choices we make, whether we know it or not. No one needs to get these diseases. No one does. Okay? My paradigm says that perfect health is the natural condition of every living organism. And perfect health is what shows up as long as we're willing to meet our body's needs the way that nature intended. Now, to be honest with you, over the last 27 and a half, nearly 28 years, having worked with more than 10,000 people, I can tell you, very few people are even coming close to meeting their body's needs the way that nature intended. And it's not because it's complicated. It's not. It's the simplest thing in the world. There are 7 key areas we need to look at. Meeting each of these areas, meeting the body's needs in each area, is simple. It's not complex. Now, notice that simple and easy are 2 different things. I'm not saying it's easy. For many people, it's not easy. It's not easy to change. It's not easy to eat in a way that most people think is crazy. Someone once said to me, raw vegans are strange people. And I thought about that for a second, and I thought, that's true. Absolutely true. Because only someone who's strange, in other words, not normal, is willing to do something when everyone around them thinks, that's crazy. Personally, I don't care what anybody thinks. And I mean anyone. I don't care what anyone thinks. So tomorrow, if God calls me on my cell phone and says, Loren, your diet, that's a bad idea, I'll say, thanks for your opinion, God. I'm good. Thank you. Because I've seen it work for every single person over and over again. It doesn't fail. Everybody gets better. Everybody. Most people wind up achieving a level of health and vitality they never thought was possible. Okay? We can feel and function so well. The truth is that some of you here, maybe most of you here, you can't really know what I'm talking about because you've never experienced it. See, most of us were born in hospitals, were injected with toxic substances within 2 hours of birth, and our health began to decline immediately. And by the time we're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, all of our experience is this. How can you know what it feels like to be here if you've been here for the last 30 years doing this? Most of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Most people feel bad after every meal. How many of you know, see if I can remember what this, Viagra. Everyone know what Viagra is? It's this stuff, right? So before Viagra was invented, the #1 selling drugs on the market were antacids. In the U.S., we've got over-the-counter ones like Rolaids, Alka-Seltzer, Broma-Seltzer. Here in Israel, do you have some of those? Maybe some other ones. You know what I'm talking about? These are pills that people take after they eat to feel. Tums. Tums is one, right? Antacids. Now, here's the crazy thing. People take antacids after every meal to feel better. #1 selling medications in the world. And yet the vast majority of people have low stomach acid. They're taking these drugs to reduce their stomach acid, and it's already too low. They're trying to suppress a symptom, and they don't know what they're doing. They're making themselves worse. But just think about this. If these were the #1 selling medications, what does that mean? It means most people feel bad whenever they eat food. It shouldn't be that way. How many of you in the last week have experienced some belly-based symptoms? Some gas, some indigestion, some bloating, some of that kind of thing. Some of you maybe don't want to raise your hands. It's okay. This may be hard to believe, but I have not experienced those symptoms in over 30 years, with the exceptions of those times I've made poor choices, where I haven't followed my own program. When I follow my program, it never, ever happens. How many of you feel bad if you don't eat a meal? skip a meal, eat late. It occurred to me years ago. Fasting isn't painful. Detoxification is painful. I met Anat at about 4:30 today. We connected at 4:30 this afternoon. I had a fig. She had fresh figs in the car. I had one. I had one at the time. That was breakfast at 4:30, 3.5 hours ago. Since then, I had 4 or 5 more figs and a handful of, I forget what they're called, longans from her tree. That's it. That's been my food intake today. I've been working all day. I've worked out. I've eaten 150 calories, maybe. Not eating isn't painful unless your body's detoxifying. The harder it is to skip a meal, the more meals you probably need to skip. When your body's clean, not eating is easy. It's typical for me, I'm so busy, it's typical for me to go a whole day without eating anything. I go, oh yeah, I forgot to eat. Oh well, I'll eat tomorrow. It's okay. I don't have less energy. I don't feel bad. I don't feel weak. I don't have a headache. Those are symptoms of detoxification. If those things happen to you, you would benefit from giving your body the concerted opportunity to cleanse and heal itself. That's what proper fasting does. Okay? There's one more piece I want to share with you before we wrap up tonight, because it's so important. And then we're going to come back and take questions. And I'm not going to answer questions. I'm just going to take them. You're going to ask questions. And I'll stand here and nod, and then we'll take another question. I like taking questions. How many of you are familiar with natural hygiene? How many of you have heard that term? Natural hygiene. So natural hygiene is about meeting the body's needs the way that nature intended. Let me tell you how I heard about it. I was giving a little lecture. I say little. There was maybe 8 people around a table at a vegan restaurant 25 years ago. Because it was such a small group, I wouldn't try this tonight here, but because we had such a small group, I said to everyone, why doesn't everyone introduce themselves? Just say say your name and something about yourself. It's an intimate group. Let's get to know each other. And one woman at the other end of the table said, I'm a natural hygienist. Now, I'd never heard that term. It sounded to me like some sort of a medical health-oriented thing, right? And at the time, I was pretty inexperienced with giving these talks. It was my first public talk, actually. Well, in this subject matter. I'd done some public speaking and some acting before. But I wasn't so sure of myself then because I hadn't worked with 10,000 people. In fact, this was the beginning of my career. And so I kept saying to her, I don't remember her name, but let's call her Debbie. I said, Debbie, what do you think? And she would say, I don't know. Every time I asked her a question, say, I don't know. That was her answer. And I started thinking, man, this woman doesn't know anything. For a health professional, she doesn't know anything. And at the end of the talk, when I was done, she came over to me and said, are you familiar with the American Natural Hygiene Society? I said, no, I've never heard of them. She said, well, you should check them out because they teach a lot of the same things that you do. See, I had simply oriented myself in the direction of nature. Nature was my teacher. But that's what natural hygiene was based on, the laws of nature. So they were saying a lot of the same things. And in fact, it was about 4 months later, they had their annual conference. I went to it. I met all these people. I thought, wow, cool, this kind of feels like home. Now, most people there were still not actually practicing what they were teaching. But they were teaching it, right? I met a few people who were actually doing it, not very many. In any case, natural hygiene has always taught that there's only one disease. Only one. Anyone know what it is? Yeah, it's toxemia. What does that mean? A toxic body. That's what medicine taught. There's a toxic body. That's all there is. Toxemia. Nothing else. If those toxins have come into your body from smoking, they're going to be in your lungs, and you're likely to develop emphysema or lung cancer or something like that. If they've come into your body through drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, then it's going to be your liver that's likely to be affected. It's going to show up in different ways. But it's always about toxins in the body. Okay? And certainly, having now fasted thousands of people, and when I talk about fasting people, you know, everyone here is familiar with fasting for Yom Kippur, yes? One day, nothing, right? No water, no food. Now, we're talking about fasting with water, not without water. But we're not talking about 1 day or 2 days. We're talking about an average of 26 days. 26 days, only water. And I know that sounds crazy to people. But some of you would be surprised to find out that the average person has an 8-week reserve. Can go 8 weeks without eating. And some people are, as I like to say, wealthy in nutrient reserves. Okay? My longest client fast ever was 4.5 months. 18.5 weeks, only water. In fact, I fasted more than 700 people for 6 weeks or longer. Every one of them still alive, at least by the end of their fast. Some of them have passed away because they started out with conditions that it was a little too late to cure. They waited too long. Sometimes the body won't heal. I don't want you to think, I hope no one's gotten the incorrect message that you can heal anything. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes there's been too much damage. But you want to be clear that our bodies are self-healing organisms. And if we catch something early enough, and it can still be pretty late sometimes. In fact, the guy who fasted with me for 18.5 weeks had stage 4 testicular cancer. Now what that means, stage 4 means it's moved through the lymphatic system into other organs. It's now spread throughout the body in at least a couple, 2 or 3 different sites. And most people with stage 4 cancer die as a result of the cancer. He fasted 18.5 weeks, and when he was done, they could not find a trace of cancer. None. Now, we've seen the same thing with stage 4 cancer on a number of occasions. But we've also seen people who'd never recovered from it. Okay, I probably have 5 or 10 clients with stage 4 cancer that are now dead over the last 20 plus years that are now dead because they waited too long and their body could not recover. Okay, each case is different. But the bottom line is that our bodies are self-healing. So chemotherapy never, ever heals anyone. Now, there might be someone here tonight that wants to argue with me because they had cancer and they got chemotherapy and the cancer was gone. And they were told they were healed. But over the years, I've probably worked with about 50 women with breast cancer. It's the most common cancer for women. We see a lot of women with breast cancer, a couple, 2, 3 a year, typically. In most cases, they're coming to us after medicine's already failed them. And here's what I mean. They got cancer, usually on one side, one breast. They got radiation, they got chemotherapy. They might have had a lumpectomy where they take out the tumor, or a mastectomy where they take the breast, or a radical mastectomy where they take the breast and lymph nodes and sometimes muscle. It's disfiguring surgery. And they're told afterward, no more cancer, you're perfectly healthy, you can go live your life. And 3 to 5 years later, the cancer comes back. Did you know that successful cancer treatment means they're alive after 5 years? That's all it means. That's considered successful, to be alive after 5 years. Okay? So most of the women I've worked with breast cancer were women that already had cancer, it came back. They're surprised because they were told they were fine. Here's what you want to be really clear about. Cancer is not the problem. The tumor is a symptom of a problem, not the problem itself. What's it a symptom of? Well, cancer is caused by two things coming together. Toxicity. Again, if you smoke cigarettes, you're putting toxic particulate matter into your lungs, lung cancer is pretty likely. Okay, you drink enough alcohol, you're very likely going to wind up with cirrhosis of the liver or liver cancer. If you chew tobacco, okay, you put a little pinch between your cheek and gum, chewing tobacco. Toxic stuff. What happens to people who put this in their mouth over and over again long enough time? Lip cancer, gum cancer, tongue cancer. Because the toxins are in contact with that part of the body. In the U.S., you guys know Israel is kind of a small place, right? In the U.S., well, we've got long highways, highways that go 5,000 kilometers. There are cops that will sit in their patrol cars with a radar gun. They used to do this, radar gun on their lap, just waiting for a car on the horizon. Then they pick it up and they point it and they just see what they're, right? This is how they get speeders on these long highways. Cops don't do this anymore. They're told, don't put the radar gun on your lap because the radar gun is constantly leaking radiation. And these state troopers wound up with much higher rates of testicular cancer than the average person because they had these radar guns constantly sitting in their laps. So they don't do it anymore. So two factors develop cancer. One, exposure to toxicity. Okay? Exposure to enough toxicity. Second one, before I cover it, let me explain. Experts say every one of us has cancer cells forming all the time. And yet, only 50% develop cancer. Only 50%. How come the other 50% of us don't have a problem? Because our body's immune function is still healthy enough to destroy those cancer cells as they form. So, cancer forms where there's exposure to significant toxicity, which is becoming increasingly common because we live in a toxic world. Look at your cell phone. I don't know, here maybe, but in most places in Tel Aviv, you've probably got 20 or 25 Wi-Fi systems reaching your device. Wi-Fi causes cancer. Here's an easy thing to do when you go home. Turn off the Wi-Fi. We have no Wi-Fi where I live. We have cabled access. You want to get online, you plug your device into a network cable because Wi-Fi causes cancer. Why would you expose yourself to that? Well, I'm being exposed to everyone else's Wi-Fi anyway. Yeah, true. But guess which one is the strongest signal in your house? Your device. Turn it off. Stop doing that to yourself. Microwave radiation from cell phone towers causes cancer. Do they have 5G yet here? Not yet. You want to move before it gets here. 5G, fifth generation cell phone signal. The technology was developed as a weapon to destroy living things. The scientists who've looked at it say that the strength of the signal is 100,000 times more powerful than is considered safe to be exposed to. If I were you, I would pick up and move before it gets here. I live in a place where it'll never occur because in order to function, they have to have a tower roughly every 2 blocks, every 200 meters. Where my closest neighbor is 500 meters away on either side. They're not going to put towers every 200 meters when there's no one living there. But if you live in a place where it's densely populated, like most of Israel, well, the third of Israel people live. Not too many people live in the Negev, which is 2/3 of your country, I think, right? But here, in this part of the country where it's so densely populated, you're going to have these towers everywhere. And this this technology kills living things. So we live in a toxic planet. We live in a toxic world. Everyone's exposed to this. But it's the exposure to toxicity and the poor immune function. Those are the two things. Okay? The tumor is a symptom of those two conditions. It's not the problem. You can eliminate the tumor by cutting it out or by poisoning the body to kill the tumor cells. But what have you done with chemotherapy? Have you made your body less toxic? No, you've made your body more toxic. What have you done to your body's immune function? Is it better? No, it's much worse than it was before. Of course cancer comes back. Of course it does. Does this make sense to you? Okay, the treatment causes the disease. You never, ever want to be exposed to these treatments, no matter what. Fasting will allow your body to eliminate the toxicity and to increase the body's immune function. Do this early enough, and cancer disappears virtually every time. Wait long enough, it can be difficult. Then it gets difficult. Okay, there's no question. But let's go back to the hydration piece, because hygiene's taught it's all about toxicity. And there's no question. I've seen a lot of very toxic bodies. It's obvious how toxic people are. Okay, it's obvious. Ever smell anybody with bad body odor? That's toxicity. How about bad breath? Unless they just ate onions or garlic, that's toxicity. Okay? That's toxicity. When the body's clean, it doesn't smell bad. I'm going to share with you more than you probably needed to know about me. I don't use soap. I don't use deodorant. I don't use toothpaste. I don't use shampoo. I don't use personal care products. I use a little bit of organic soap to shave here, and here. That's it. Nothing else. Because when your body's clean, it doesn't smell bad. But I came across a book about 30 years ago called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Anyone heard of this book? Yeah? The book was written by an MD who was originally, where was he from? I don't remember where he's from, doesn't matter. But he was actually working outside of Washington, D.C., where I lived. It's called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Now, I was a child of the 60s and 70s. One of my favorite superheroes was Batman. And this book was written by a guy called Dr. Batman. His name was actually Batman Gelage, but no one could pronounce his name. And so everyone called him Dr. Batman. And I thought, I've got to read Batman's book. So I read this book, and he was talking about helping people eliminate their symptoms, feeling good, with all kinds of conditions, simply by getting them hydrated. Now remember, he was a doctor. Doctors specialize in suppressing symptoms. That's what medicine is. Medicine never addresses causes. It doesn't. Okay, the most important thing for your health is what you eat. And the average doctor has 3 hours of nutrition in medical school. Okay? So, in typical medical fashion, what he did, Dr. Batman, was he looked at suppressing a symptom, the symptom of dehydration, without ever addressing the cause. I've already told you, I'm raw vegan for tomorrow, 28 years. But my diet focuses on foods as they're found in nature, which means what? High water content. Because most people are severely dehydrated. And 14 and a half years ago, I moved my company, my center, to Central America. We're in Costa Rica. It's amazing, by the way. Paradise. Our scale broke in the journey. So I went to buy a new scale, and I came across something I'd never seen before, a bioimpedance scale. How many of you know what this is? Bioimpedance. You've probably seen the technology. You can buy a $30, $40 bathroom scale these days. 100, 120 shekels, 150 shekels. You can get a scale that will tell you how much body fat you have, what your hydration is. That's bioimpedance. It's sending a tiny amount of electric current up through one foot. It comes out through the other foot. You have to tell it how tall you are, your gender, your age, and it's based on a complicated algorithm, supposedly 99% accurate, probably not actually 99%, but pretty accurate in determining your level of hydration. It was actually invented by an American scientist. The U.S. military went to this scientist 30 or 40 years ago, the first time we were involved in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. The U.S. military had all these servicemen in desert conditions, and they wanted to be sure they weren't getting dehydrated, dangerously dehydrated. And so he came up with this technology, which is a portable way to measure hydration levels. We got this device. We were closed at the time. I had 4 students with me and staff members who had all been my clients and students. And there was no one else there. And we measured everyone, and everyone was between 70 and 80% water. And I thought, okay, that's pretty good. I believe we should be 75%. Everyone was, almost. And then we opened a couple weeks later, and we started measuring. We had 14 guest beds at the time. We now have more than that. We had 14 at the time. We started measuring our clients, and we saw people who were 60% hydrated. And I thought, really? And then we saw people who were 50%, even as low as 35% hydrated. And I thought, how can these people be alive if they've got half the water they should have? What it took me several years to realize, because the manufacturers didn't help me with this, we actually are now in our 4th or 5th generation device. The device we now use is it was a $500 bioimpedance device. That's pretty good. But the manufacturer didn't tell us that there's almost no water in body fat. So almost no water in body fat. So imagine, I've had clients over 400 pounds. Okay, that's what, 190, 180, 190 kilos. Okay? Imagine if that person should have been 70 kilos and they were 190 kilos instead. Nearly 3 times what they should have weighed. That means that the vast majority of their body mass is fat. And if fat has almost no water, they're going to have very little water in their body. The machine only tells you what percentage of your mass is water. So when we were seeing people who were 70, 75% water, that's because all the people we were measuring at the time, my students and I, were all lean. And by the way, with the exception of animals who need excess body fat for insulation in either very hot or very cold climates, in every species, the healthiest members of the species are among the leanest members of the species. You know, there are places on the planet where animals need to carry a lot of body fat because they might not be able to eat for months at a time. Polar bears. When pregnant polar bears don't hibernate like some other bears do. But pregnant polar bears spend 5 months underground not eating or drinking anything. 5 months. During which time they will consume half their weight in body fat. They come out half the weight they went in. Perfectly fine. In fact, before they have their first meal, on average, they've got to hike 75 miles. That's what, about 110, 120 kilometers. They've got to walk that far to get their first meal on average, because where they spend that time resting and where their feeding grounds are about 120 kilometers apart. That's just the way it happens. Okay? Humans, us, you guys, we're all going to be going home in the next hour, probably have thousands of calories in your kitchen. You don't need to carry thousands of excess calories on your body because you have access to food whenever you want it. How does it help you to walk around with excess weight? It doesn't. We don't need that. Some species need it, we don't. Can you see that? So we're going to be healthier if we're leaner. Not too much. We need to have a little bit of body fat. 2 to 2.5% is essential fat. I'm not suggesting anyone should be 2% body fat. That's not very attractive. Okay? Men, 5 to 12%. Women, 15 to 20. Maybe 22 in some cases. That's about all. Most of the women we've measured, and we've measured a lot of women over the last 22 years, well, 14 years we've been measuring body fat. The average woman we measure is around 35% body fat. The average guy we measure is over 25%. Most people are carrying twice as much as they need or more. That's not helping anyone. Okay? As we metabolize fat, we're making water. Perfect water. But it's not enough. The polar bear can fast without drinking any water because she's making all the water she needs. But the average person is dehydrated because they've been eating dried food. Bread, pasta, cereals. How much water do they have? You guys know what corn chips are? Doritos. Yeah, everyone know Doritos? How much water would you guess a Dorito has? Minus what? Minus 13? No. They're actually about 3% water. They're 3% water. But the corn that they're made from started out being mostly water, 80, 90% water. All the water is removed in the cooking and processing. Now imagine eating a whole bag of Doritos. Anyone ever done this? Eat a whole bag of Doritos? I have, right? You eat the Doritos. When they come back out of your body, are they as dry as when they went in? You better hope not. That would be pretty uncomfortable if they were. Okay? They go in almost completely dry and they come out 75% water. Stool on average. Poop, 75% water. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from your body. Most people are severely dehydrated because they're living on dry food our whole lives. Oh, but I had an apple today. On top of what else? Everything else was dry and there was an apple, right? Doesn't do much. You get your body clean and then live on food that's mostly water, you stay hydrated. It's amazing what happens. A couple of years ago, we're almost done here. A couple of years ago, I got an email from a woman. She said, Loren, I'm in Costa Rica. I'm from Poland. I'm visiting Costa Rica. I'm a big fan. I watch all your videos. I'd love to meet you and come see the place. So I said, sure. Come join us on Tuesday. Come around lunchtime. We'll have lunch together. We sit down, she and I and a volunteer, 3 of us, with a watermelon. Everyone's got a plate. We've got this big watermelon on a cutting board. And she says, can I have a bowl too? I said, sure. What for? She said, well, I don't swallow the fiber. I just spit it out. I just swallow the juice and spit out the fiber. I said, really? Why? She said, well, to be honest, I can't swallow the fiber anymore. I can't get it down. I can't swallow it. She said, I think it's because I'm so well hydrated. Right? Now, I thought, that doesn't make any sense. But the first thing, when she showed up, she arrived, and I looked at her and I thought, what a nice little old lady. I thought she's probably 72, 75. Why did I think that? What do you think? Tons of wrinkles on her face. She had on a low cut top like this. The skin on her chest was sagging like this in lines. On her arms, the skin was sagging. We sit down to have lunch together. We start talking. I find out, I don't remember now, honestly, if she was a month older or a month younger than me. Her face was covered with wrinkles. And she's telling me, no, I know I'm hydrated, she says, because I've been living on high water content fruit for 30 years. It might surprise some of you. How many of you here live on a fruit-based diet already? Awesome. So a lot of people think, well, if you're living on high water content fruit, you don't have to drink water. Right? I mean, I grew up, most of the time I was only drinking when I was eating food. I don't know if you guys eat peanut butter here. So I grew up in the U.S. eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. If you've ever tried to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without drinking something, it's not going down, okay? You can't swallow a bite of peanut butter and jelly if you don't drink something. And most of my drinking happened in order to get food down my throat because it was food that didn't have any water in it. You switch to a fruit-based diet, you think it's got all the water I need. The problem is there's still pounds and pounds of old material. In fact, there was a study published in Denmark just a few years ago, and their conclusion was that 5 to 10 kilos of old waste was typical. Now, I was talking with someone before we started tonight, a doctor said, you know, do they ever see this stuff? Can you see it if you swallow the pill? I don't know. Doctors tell me it doesn't exist. And yet every person who fasts with me, and our protocol is different than anywhere else, eliminates pounds and pounds of it. In fact, 6 to 10 times a year, we'll have people come to us who fasted at this competitor, True North in California. True North, much safer. True, safe, because they stop your process before anything can happen. Okay, that's what happens. They're told to limit their water intake. Their fasts average 10 to 11 days, and they stay physically active the whole time. They're walking up and down stairs because their rooms are on the second floor, and they've got activities all day on the first floor. We have no activities, we have no stairs, and you're recommended, you're encouraged to drink lots of water, much more. And I can tell you how much each day by properly interpreting your daily vital signs. Every day, single day, we talk. I look at your blood pressure, your pulse, your temperature, and I say to you, okay, you did a good job with water, or you need more water based on those numbers. When people follow my protocol and do what I ask them to do, invariably they eliminate kilos and kilos of old, hard, stinky, black material. And when the people come to us from this other place, the first thing I'll say to them is, how much old stuff did you eliminate? And they'll say, what do you mean? Because they didn't eliminate any of it. And then they fast with me and they eliminate pounds, kilos, and kilos of it. Okay? It's in the process if you do it correctly. The point is this. Dehydration is actually the primary factor. Getting your body hydrated changes everything. You can't do that until you eliminate all the old waste. No matter how clean your diet is, if you haven't fasted long enough and eliminated this old material, you're never going to get hydrated because the water's going into the stuff. It's sitting there like a giant sponge, absorbing the water. This is why this woman, who after 30 years living on high water content fruit was my age, was covered with wrinkles. What didn't you understand? High water content food. Watermelon, 92% water. Papayas, 90% water. Oranges, tangerines, pomelos, pomelite, 88% water. She was eating high water content fruit, but it won't hydrate you. Let me finish. It won't hydrate you until you clean out all the old material, because that old material is sitting there like a giant sponge absorbing the water. So she had fasted, by the way, but she hadn't fasted properly. In fact, what she had done was called dry fasting. She'd done a lot of it. In this last session, we ended our session. Our sessions end on Saturdays. This Saturday will be 3 weeks since we ended our last session. I flew here the next day. We had 3 men between 28 and 42 who'd all done extensive dry fasting. Let's say like Yom Kippur, extended. Not 1 day, 3, 4, 5, 7 days. Some people go 10 days. No food, no water. These 3 people were the most dehydrated people we had out of the 60 or so who fasted with us this past session. They were all severely dehydrated. That's all dry fasting does, is ensure that you become more dehydrated. Okay? So Now, I've touched on a lot of subjects. Anybody find any of this stuff interesting so far? Anybody learn anything at all? Tiny bit? I hope so. Okay, my goal is to entertain you, make sure you have fun, and to teach you important ideas. Empowering ideas that can help you take your health to an amazing new level. But there's no way in 2 or 3 hours we can fill in all the details. The details are going to happen on Saturday. So let's take a break. You can go use the bathroom, get something. Is there anything left to eat out there? There's still some stuff to eat. You better run, though.